Hey T-heads, what is love? Love is an ancient concept, perhaps as long as human history, which has morphed over thousands of years but remains ever present in the conversations of the modern day. And yet, despite its long history occupying the thoughts and discussions of humanity, and one of the most common themes in the creative arts, we find ourselves so far away from any agreement as to what it actually is, and even a simple definition to teach our children. But that lack of definition or deep understanding does not stop us from proclaiming that love is the most important aspect of the human experience, one that we chase incessantly and question whether or not we have found. Have you ever been in love? How can you be sure? Many of us also see love as the universal answer to so much of the strife of the world. We shout out that love is the answer without any consistent or substantial understanding of what love actually is. In this little talk, I will walk with you through my personal exploration of love and my own tentative conclusions, which as always are subject to change. I certainly do not claim to have the answer to the question of what is love, but I am here to say that I do think that we have a job to do in uncorrupting the concept of love if we're going to allow the power of love to positively affect our lives, drive humanity towards a more sustainable and enlivening future, and steer us away from the existential perils which threaten our human civilization. Quick sip of tea. If you're watching at the time of release of this video, then Happy New Year, Xinyan Kuaila. As many of you know, every Chinese New Year I like to take a step sideways and leave the subject of tea to dive into other areas of interest which are on my mind while I'm sipping on the good stuff. If you like this video, then check out our previous year's speeches covering concepts like truth, reality, value, consciousness, amongst others. These speeches are actually all kind of related. And as you'll see, I've become quite convinced that love is a key part of the discussion of the metaphysics of all reality. In my younger years, I would flip between being a romantic, arguing for the primacy of feelings over rationality, where love was a transcendent ideal unlike any other that could not be explained by the cold codes of a mechanistic universe, to taking a very simple dictionary view of love as just a form of affection, which is higher in intensity to mere liking, but essentially made up of the same emotion. So how can we begin to tease apart this monolith of culture, arts, personal and spiritual practice? Why is love so difficult to pin down? After all, we've made better attempts to have constructive discourse on the meaning of other abstract forms like justice, value, goodness, ethics, etc. On the most simple level, is it a verb or a noun? In other words, is it an act requiring a subject and an object, or does love exist or emerge from a connection between two? In other words, is love a behavior or a feeling? When we say I love you, do we actually mean I have feelings of love for you? Or am I in the act of loving you through choice or instinct? If it is a verb, then what is the act of loving? And why can't we do it with everyone? And if love is a noun rather than a verb, then how does this unique feeling emerge, and why is it seemingly so difficult to attain? Or is love a universal form which exists independent of humans, but which we can tune into in our lives given the right circumstances and training? And what about all the different types of love out there? Soulmate, romantic love, familial love, platonic love, companionate love, self-love, love for the non-personal such as nature or your job, and the divine love of God. Are they all referring to the same love? In many cultures, there are different terms used to denote the different types of love. In ancient Greece, there was agape, referring to love without any judgment or without any judgment of the value of the object of that love. This is often seen as akin to the love of God for humanity and described on human terms as unconditional love, or to will the good of another, coined by Thomas Aquinas. Then there was eros, a term describing a passionate, desiring and intimate love. Eros is often tied culturally in with sexuality, but many scholars do not see sex as the fundamental requirement for eros, but rather a passionate love which elevates intimacy beyond physical gratification and into the realms of a desiring of wholeness and interconnection, and a love of the ideals themselves rather than the person who exhibits those ideals. There was also philia, a dispassionate yet virtuous affection for others divorced from sexual desire and often considered to be more collaborative and friendly and mutually beneficial. It involves concepts such as loyalty and familiarity. Another Greek term for love is storge, which mostly relates to the love and empathy between members of the same family, especially of parents and children. In many ways, it makes sense to differentiate the different facets of love in order to help provide clearer definitions. After all, we can all clearly say that romantic, passionate love of, say, eros is a different feeling to the storge love between a parent and a child. But do they have different sources altogether, or can you trace their paths back to the same origins? Let's talk about the modern day interpretations of love. You could categorize the approaches to love under the following headings. So the physicalist. To the physicalist, love is an emergent construct, which is not fundamental to nature, but which provides biological evolutionary advantage and can be understood entirely, eventually, through neurophysiology, psychology, and chemistry. The love of the parent for a child ensures that the children are nurtured and protected. The love between friends encourages collaboration to help the species prosper beyond genetics. The love between couples enhances mate selection, ensures sexual reproduction, long-term mating, and attachment to raise children well. So the body is programmed to the physicalist to release chemicals under particular circumstances to give you those feelings of love for evolutionary advantage. A quick browse online will show a variety of theories proposed about love and studies showing what the exact requirements for love may be, such as trust, intimacy, respect, attraction, and similarities. Then you've got the romantic. The romantic approach generally views love as a transcendent state of emotions, which cannot be explained entirely by the physicalists or rationally understood or reduced to a set of evolutionary practicalities for the human species. To a romantic, love, just like all emotions, are personal verities or truths which cannot be unpicked by cognition. To a romantic, there may not be one definition of love, but rather a framework for love upon which we can all decorate our own personal versions of love. Then you've got the spiritualists. Most religions see love as a connection to the divine and as a fundamental trait of God, which is projected into the human realm. Of course, these three categorizations, the physicalists, the romantics, and the spiritualists, simplify the diverse opinions on love out there. And it's also important to note that they don't have to be exclusive. For example, many people believe that love has an evolutionary role and may be emergent, but still cling to the romantic or perhaps religious idea of love and the primacy of their emotions. But let's see how we got here by taking a broad overview of Western history. In the pre-modern era, there was no questioning of God. The metaphysical questions of reality were answered by religion. In Christianity, God is love, and to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself are the most important teachings of the religion. Love requires forgiveness, charity, kindness, and the recognition that we're all flawed. And if God can love us unconditionally, then we should aspire to the same kind of love. In Judaism, love is similarly focused on the love for God and for thy neighbor as a selfless act, mirroring God's love. In Sufi cosmology, scholars assert that love stems from the divine and that human love is a pathway to union with the divine. In Islam, one of the 99 names for God is the loving one, and Ishq is a divine love and a projection of the essence of God into the universe. In Chinese philosophy, love, or ai, is a way to cultivate ren, which is to embody the virtues of humanity with selflessness, self-cultivation, and harmonious relationships with all. This cultivation of Ren leads to Ling, a direct connection to the sacred or divine. So love is, again, a way of connecting to universal love and a pathway to the divine. In Buddhism, love is seen in a similar light as selfless and universal, and in some traditions, love becomes a symbol and method for unity and universal connection. You can go on and on and on. In all religious or spiritual traditions that I know of, love plays a central role as our connection with the divine or universal. And so in pre-modern times, love was seen through this lens as a way to commune with and revere God or the divine or the universal. Love was often intertwined with destiny or fate and sometimes was governed by God's plans. With this shared view of love having a more vertical component connecting with the divine, human relationships while still being driven by desire and ideals of beauty, were perhaps more focused on the practical rather than romantic, and to love another was an act of virtue mirroring the divine. But then we entered the modern era with the Renaissance in the 15th century, the scientific revolution of the 16th century, and the age of enlightenment in the 17th century. They all tumbled together, and the view of love had to change. Descartes famously asserted his radical shift from the norm with Cartesian dualism, which is basically the idea that the natural world and the mind or consciousness are made up of different stuff. Previously, the standard narrative for reality in pre-modern times was that God made everything and reality could only be truly understood or interpreted through the lens of religion, at least in the Western world. With Descartes' dualism, nature became mechanistic and understandable rationally, and the mind or other immaterial concepts like the soul or consciousness could be handled by the church. An uneasy marriage then continued into the age of enlightenment, with religion and science taking custody of different areas of the discussion of reality and the human experience. The church took ownership over the soul, spirit, and consciousness, while science and philosophy set about to unravel the mechanistic nature of everything else in the universe. Of course, the church and the rationalists often butted heads, and the relationship was complicated as there was no neat way to create borders between the two approaches. And love was eventually at that border. Should it continue to be considered in the realm of the divine and the teachings of religion, or is it part of the natural world which can be understood rationally? As the Enlightenment era trundled on and paved the way for the Industrial Revolution, there was less and less room for religion, and the church's position became more and more marginalized as the rationalists took over more ground. With the new study of psychology, even aspects of the mind and behavior, including the concepts of love, were being taken over by the rationalists. Everything was up for grab by these reductionist physicalists, and the rising movement of atheism meant that for many people the church represented a bygone era of superstition to be left for history and those foolish enough to continue to have faith. For many people, love lost its connection to the divine or the universal. Reality had become purely mechanical, reduced to its physical atomized components, with everything seen as explainable when subject to the scientific methods. For some, this was an exciting time of discovery and learning, of breaking down old dogmas, perhaps to create new ones, but that's the subject of another discussion. But for others, this mechanistic worldview, where we're all lumbering robots, which can be reduced to nothing more than our physical parts, felt so at odds with the internal human experience of deep emotions, of intuition, of desire. The marginalization of religion meant that there was a vacuum that needed to be filled to express and comprehend the immaterial and this interior human experience. And love was at the top of those experiences. This gave birth to the Romantic movement, a reaction against the cold, rational, mechanistic approach to understanding. The Romantics were rebels of the time, celebrating the individual human experience, the primacy of subjectivity, intuition, imagination, and emotion to understand the world, rather than accepting the hegemony of the Enlightenment and industrial approaches to mechanistic reductionism. Romantics treated the natural world with reverence and awe and opposed the scientific rationalization of nature. Romantics glorified the past and in many ways borrowed from the church, creating the idea of the suffering romantic, a secular Christ-like figure denounced by society for preaching a more transcendent truth, yet idolized by those who follow. In many ways, the Romantics went in search of the emotions and experiences that we may have had towards religion and God and relocated them to nature and to another person. Love had been left homeless with the marginalization of the church and the rise of atheism during the 17th and 18th centuries, and found itself being picked apart by the rationalists, but it had found a new home in the Romantic movement. And while it remained separated from the ideas of God, it became elevated once again as a noble virtue to revere and experience. But romantic love was different to pre-modern ideas of love. With God largely absent, love became an individual experience of intense emotion and passion for another person, rather than for the more universal approach of love as a universal virtue and teaching of God. Love, in a way, stopped being something to learn and practice with everyone, but rather it was meant to be visceral, instinctive, immediate, and authentic with your one true soulmate. Just happens. The Romantic era dispersed by the beginning of the 20th century, but its lasting effect on the ideas around love continue today. While psychologists, neurobiologists, sociologists, and other scientific disciplines attempt to study and uncover the truth of what love is with technical papers and self-help books, there is the ongoing echo from the Romantic movement, which positions love as something magical, transcendent, and the greatest of all emotions, which we should all seek to experience. Everywhere you look in society, there is an obsession with the romantic love story, the arts from books to films to music, the conversations between friends, the industries built around helping you to find, celebrate, and keep your soulmate. Love is everywhere, but with no religious or spiritual origin. For many people, love has lost its divine or universal source. Of course, there has also been a reaction to this shimmering portrayal of the elusive romantic love, with many shunning the representations of romantic love as unrealistic, and some people choosing to relinquish the idea of romantic love altogether in favor of singular pursuits or a never-ending array of hookups. But you can't help but get the feeling that you just need to scratch the surface or even the most hardened non-romantic, and you will find a romantic longing hiding within. The fact is that we are all drawn to love. The problem is, I think, that love has become so corrupted over the past few centuries, and many of us feel that we are left with the choice of chasing a seemingly unattainable love or giving up on love altogether. Marriages are failing at a record level. The institution of marriage itself is under threat, with trends in the UK showing a predicted 70% drop in the rate of marriage in less than 2 generations. Birth rates are plummeting in many countries. People are settling down at a later and later age, and many have given up on the idea of a love relationship altogether. Of course, these trends are due to many other factors, but I think that it is clear that our confused understanding of love is a part of the problem. So, what are the answers? This has been occupying my mind over recent months for some reason, and I do not claim to have the answers. There are plenty of people more studied in this subject who you can go and explore, but that has never stopped me before from giving my opinion in the past. So, here is my current thinking. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of relationships and what I think makes them work or why they fail, because that would be a whole other video. And as I said, there are many other experts in this field. I will, however, say that I agree with many of the experts out there who say that there are many notions in romantic love that do more harm than good in relationships. For example, the notion of the perfect soulmate who should never need to change because you love and accept everything about them, and you just work together and understand each other implicitly without even speaking. Or the idea that the passionate love affair that started your relationship should burn as brightly for the rest of your life, and that you should never be attracted to another. Or the bizarre ideal that one person should somehow fulfill all of your needs and you should never feel lonely. They should be your ultimate lover, best friend, counselor, co-parent, household partner, favorite travel companion, funniest person in the room, etc. If we look at the more traditional religious pre-modern tenets of love, or still existing religious tenets of love, we see a very different approach to the romantics. Love is being charitable to others' imperfections, with the recognition that we're all flawed, to offer kindness, benevolence, and forgiveness, to be loyal and patient, and allow everyone the opportunity to grow and evolve and adapt to each other's different phases of life, to be generous with your love, and to love everything. This form of love aims to mirror divine or universal love. It may not sound as exciting as romantic love, but it is also less selfish, without a checklist of qualities which you or your soulmate must possess to be deserving of love. In this religious form, love is a universal virtue that exists outside of us, which we can emote and express in our lives and with others. But what about the thrill of love, the magic, the passion, and the joy that romantic love seems to offer? How did we get to a point where we have to choose between an unrealistic and selfish love or a love which may be virtuous but lacks the fireworks? You see, I think that we can have it all. The transcendent joy of romantic love and the benevolent virtue of religious love. But to get there, we have to reconfigure what love means. The best starting point, I think, for that remapping is the love that you feel for your child. Almost anyone who has had children will tell you that the love that a parent has for a child is a love like no other. It combines the selfless, forgiving, unconditional love of religious teachings with the most incredible, natural, authentic, and immediate visceral explosion of long-lasting emotions presented in romanticism. Of course, this is not the case for everyone, and I want to recognize that for many parents, this feeling of love can be a more winding pathway. I do, however, want to point to this common experience of the incredible love that a parent has for a child as a paragon of love from which we can begin to understand and elucidate the true nature of love. So what is it about this parent-child love that makes it so different? Biologists may say that this is nature's way of making sure that you nurture and care for your child and make the necessary sacrifices to keep your selfish genes going. They may be right, but this does not mean that the feelings of love are less real and that the lessons cannot be applied to other relationships. I think that the reason why the love for a child is so strong is that in that child, you are experiencing the miracle of life and consciousness. You are finding a connection to the divine or universal, no matter what your religious position. It is revelatory. It's a revelatory experience connecting you to the wonder of creation. Most parents will tell you that when you have a child, you strangely have more love for all children as you feel that miracle in them too. And think about any time that you've felt the exalting sense of love for another person. Didn't the whole world around you feel more miraculous? Didn't existence itself vibrate at a higher intensity and shimmer with an almost divine beauty? It is that emotional connection to the miracle of being that I think is the true heart of what love is, and in many ways is the essence of the religious love and the reason why Christians say that God is love. See, I believe in a Trinitarian definition of love. What I mean is that love cannot exist between two, but must be connected to a third. Think of 2 points connected by a line. It is essentially formless, shapeless, with no anchor or reference to know its position. There is no two-sided shape in geometry that is not degenerate. And for me, 2 represents separation, a splitting of the whole into 2 parts to create definition and difference. Sure, the outside and the inside, the subject and the object, the one and the other. The reason why the Trinity or triad is so fundamental in many world religions and spiritual practices is, in my view, because it is unifying. Either religions stick to one monotheistic God and there is never any separation, or the concepts form trinities to allow for connection within any separation. 3 creates the triangle, which now has shape, and every point can be referenced by its connection to the other. It gives us the third eye of discernment. It provides structure and strength and rescues us from relativism. I look at you and you look at me, but without a witness, how do we know that you are real? How do I know that you are real? So how does this apply to love? In my view, the love taught by many religions is Trinitarian in nature. Quick sip of tea. So in many religions, God loves you, you love God. Then you mirror that loving virtue to another person who themselves have that loving connection with God, and you have a trinity of love. In other words, love requires 3, the subject, the object, and the unifying connection, which is distinct from either of them, but to which they both feel connected to. And have love with. The question is, what is that third connection? For those who are religious, that connection continues to be God. But before I give you my take on what that third connection may be, let's look at what happened to that Trinity since the modern era. With religion being dismissed by many since the Enlightenment, society lost that third node in our love triangle. And love became unhinged as an unchoreographed dance between individuals, directed only by the prevailing and changing societal norms and traditions. The Romantic movement attempted to revive the beauty of love and elevate its importance, but due to the lack of a religious source and the Romantic obsession with the individual and the primacy of subjectivity, it too failed to provide a universal third point in the Trinity. Instead, couples had to find their own reference points of unifying connection, which were invariably fluid, changeable, and relative. There would always be someone else who may represent a better unifying connection, be it shared humor, tastes, methods of communication, politics, phase of life, economic aspirations, interests, etc. So Romantics, quite rightly in my view, championed the transcendental importance of love, but did not provide any structure to allow it to flourish, instead leaving it to the changing whims of individual subjectivity and influenced by the trends of the time and the marketeers wishing to sell an idea of love for their own gains. This is not to say that seeking a partner that shares interests or humor or ways of seeing the world are not important, but just that these are not the third point in the Trinity. So what is the third point? Good question. I think that it must be transcendent from the individuals, and it must be universal, an unarguable and unchanging anchor which you and your partner can authentically connect with, independent of each other. While God may be the answer for some, I prefer a more secular answer. In Christianity, God is love, and St. Augustine interpreted the Trinity in terms of love so that the Trinity of love is the person who is loving, the person who is beloved, and love itself. I like this as a starting point. We love another, we allow ourselves to be loved by that other, and we are connected with our love for universal love itself. But perhaps this is getting too abstract, and we should go back to the love of the parent for their children. I think that the third point of the Trinity is simply the miracle of being, of consciousness, of being a sentient and feeling person with the ability to experience the act of living, including the sensations of love. Some people may see this as a reverence and love of God, but atheists can also use this template. It is not necessarily about how we came to be, but the miracle that we are being. The universal feeling of love, and the third point in the Trinity, is the transcendent sense of wonder of creation, the feeling of absolute oneness with the universe, and the joy of being. By cultivating this love affair with existence itself, we have a universal anchor to create our Trinity for strong, sustainable, and meaningful relationships. So this, I think, is the first step for finding and building truly loving relationships, to connect to a reverential and unconditional love, or agape, for being itself, to bask in the joy of your own being and see that wonder in all beings around you. Tapping into this universal love is, I think, essential. Of course, you can do this whilst in a relationship too, but it is partly a solitary practice as you build your loving connection to the divine or universal. This requires awareness and gratitude and forgiveness and acceptance and feeling that universal and unconditional love for yourself as well as for others. It requires relinquishing judgments and letting go of fear. Some may use meditation, others may use nature, others may just use awareness to mindfully experience the wondrous sensory joys that life has to offer. Others may turn to spiritual or religious teachings. However you do it, it will be personal, but building that reciprocal and unconditional love for being itself, I think, is the essential component of the Trinity of love. Need more tea. Finding others who share this love affair with creation, or helping them to cultivate this enduring love by example, will lead to strong and loving relationships, because love is not solely about you or them, but is a celebration of the miracle of existence. This is why it is natural to love your child, as you have personally been a part of that miracle of creation and their unique expression of consciousness. And once you have created this Trinity with friends, family, or lovers, the only difference is the style of love that exists between you. In other words, how you celebrate this love affair with existence together. The ancient Greeks may have asked, do you feel agape, an unconditional and selfless love? Eros, a passionate, intimate, and connecting love. Storge, a deep familial love, love of family, or philia, a friendship. Being in romantic love is ultimately, I think, about finding someone with whom you can share this state of wonder of creation authentically and intimately, with whom you feel totally connected to the source, whether you call it God or not, and can engage all of your senses to feast on this miracle together. Your love can then evolve to find new ways to celebrate this connection to the source through the changing phases of your life together. All romantic love will begin, hopefully, with eros and philia. And as you explore your relationship, other strands of unconditional agape love may develop, and storge love may grow, especially if you have a family together. And so, like strings on a guitar, the many strands of love can exist between you, and some strings will be played more than others depending on your phase of life together. And so the chords and melodies of your love affair will make different music throughout your relationship together. And it's okay and natural for the styles of love and the music that you play together to shift and change over time, because your relationship is securely anchored in a higher love for creation itself and is not reliant on maintaining one form of love or one style of music. Now, does this form of Trinitarian romantic love mean that there won't be any breakups or divorce? No, of course not. It just means that the ending of a relationship will be because you can no longer celebrate the wonder of existence together in a way that feels authentic anymore. It means that the strings of that guitar were too few or discordant when played together. Perhaps eros declined and you had not built a strong enough bond of philia or agape, or perhaps the family love or storge became so dominant a sound that you were neglecting playing the other strings. But this point of breakup, I think, is a much harder place to get to in a relationship compared with a relationship determined solely on the evolving qualities of each other and a romantic obsession of consistent intensity of emotions. With a powerful universal connecting point to anchor you and an understanding of the different styles of love to nurture and to play with, it gives a clearer framework, I think, to learn and work on your love together. This form of love also more easily adopts the religious view of love as being charitable, benevolent, and forgiving, because the love itself is, again, not exclusively determined by the qualities of the other person. This is not to say that we do not practice discernment and offer feedback to another and just love them unconditionally. Love is not about blindly endorsing everything about another person. That's just an egoic demand for self-approval. Instead, this love has a more accepting and respectful foundation by celebrating that person's intrinsic value as a wonder of creation. It reminds me of the yogic phrase, "The light in me honors the light in you." This form of Trinitarian love is by no means novel or new. It is not my invention. It is the kind of love discussed for millennia, but I think it needs reframing and promoting in a more secular society. We have all heard the rallying cries that love is the key or love is the answer to all of our problems. These become easy to dismiss when we have a confused idea of what exactly love is. But as I explore the concept of love, I've become more and more convinced that love is indeed fundamental. And if you allow me, on this Chinese New Year, to entertain myself further, love has begun to represent to me the force of attraction which opposes entropy and chaos and brings wholeness and connection. Love is the engine that drives creation and propels evolution to create more complexity and higher states of consciousness against all of the odds and seeming randomness. Love may be synonymous with other concepts like chi or prana, a force that brings light and wholeness and life. The opposite of love is not hate. It is, in my view, a combination of fear and judgment, the results of which always lead to destruction and separation. Whenever we fear or judge another, we are closing off our hearts to love. We live in times of great change, and humanity is on the edge, I think, of many existential precipices. If fear and judgment control our decisions, then I do not hold out much hope that we will navigate these challenges successfully. I know that it sounds trite and simplistic, but I truly believe that cultivating love is the answer. But it starts with a better understanding of what love is, rather than scrawling this phrase on a placard or on your social feeds. So I would ask you to think about a reinterpretation of love. Let's start afresh, learn from tradition, discard the myths, and build a universal view of love that we can all learn and practice and teach our children. I'm committed to learning more about love, and I would love to hear your thoughts. I hope that you all celebrate the wonder of existence as the greatest love affair of them all, and that you share this celebration with all that you meet, and through so doing, you cultivate true love with others. I raise a cup and offer my love to each and all. Happy New Year. Bye.